This is a production of Cornell University.
Okay. Well, welcome to this morning's first plenary, Global Opportunities and Partnerships for Agricultural Librarians. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Connie Britton, president of USAIN, and USAIN itself, the United States Agricultural Information Network, for their sponsorship of this plenary. The format here is going to be fairly informal. I will have our panelists introduce themselves and talk a little bit about their experience, and then we're going to open it up as a conversation. And we hope to get a lot of back and forth. There'll be a microphone here, so if you have a question for the panelists, we ask that you come and ask your question, and then the panelists will answer it, and we'll go back and forth and hopefully have a good dialogue and discussion about the topic. So I'm going to turn it over to the panelists and have them introduce themselves. Marty?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Martin Kesselman, and I'm the Agriculture and Environmental Sciences Librarian at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. I am at the rank of full professor. Librarians at Rutgers have full faculty status. We go through the same promotion, tenure requirements. We're members of AAUP. We're on the same salary scale as the teaching faculty. The reason I point that out is that when I work with academic departmental faculty, one of the things that I feel very empowered because of that I'm speaking to these people as an equal, and in some cases, even as somebody at a higher level than they are. And so it allows me to be a little bit more vocal and a little bit more in their face, which I see as an advantage, So that's as my way of as an introduction.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Jose, and I'm the Teal Outreach and Training Coordinator in Latin America and the Caribbean.
I'm Julie Kelly, and Linda Eels and I work on the Ag Econ Search Project, and we're both at the University of Minnesota.
I'm Barbara Eden. I'm Director of Preservation for Cornell University Library. I've worked here forever, even before we were automated. Can anyone in this room raise their hand and say they know what a McBee card is? Just a few. You're showing your age.
Hi, I'm Camille Andrews. I'm Learning Technologies and Assessment Librarian here at Mann at Cornell.
So I'm going to start the panel off with a question of my own. How did you, this is very broad, and you can interpret it as you like, but how did you come about establishing your partnership, or partnerships in that case? How did that come about? So I'll throw that out to the group.
I think there's a various numbers of ways. I've been on grants that I've initiated with academic faculty. In this case, it was what I'm really going to focus on was a USAID grant that libraries and gender issues were built into the grant. And so they actually, in the Department of Plant Sciences and Engineering, which are the two groups involved with the grant, made the entree, to the libraries to be involved. So I think it can happen both ways.
For the Teal project, we are always working to raise awareness of teal in the region, and so often we respond to requests from subscriber institutions who want us to come in and do a workshop. And at this workshop, we will have other institutions in the area also come along. And sometimes we'll initiate something, or FAO will ask us to come because they're doing a workshop on Agora, and so we'll do something on teal and so on. So it's both we facilitate workshops or we respond to requests for them.
No, Aggie Concert started out as a local Midwestern project and just grew and grew, and we ended up with affiliations with international associations that they approached us and said, couldn't they join in? And so it happened. It wasn't planful. It just started out. It sort of grew in ways we didn't expect.
So the project that I represent here at Cornell is a training program in preservation for academic libraries, primarily in Beijing. And our project got started because of external funding opportunities based on a long history of training in preservation and conservation nationally, regionally, and internationally.
And I've chiefly been involved in projects through Teal and Agora. The training that Nicole mentioned, I've been on a few trips through Ethiopia, also partnerships with ACI and WACI, so trips to South Africa, also for training. And in some ways I consider myself having sort of accidental international opportunities in some cases. The latest opportunity came about through a conference in Havana, Cuba Transatlantica, and having the opportunity to go there, investigate how people were using agricultural resources as an interdisciplinary, in interdisciplinary fields, and also investigating some of the resources at the National Library and the University of Havana Central Library.
So I'm going to turn it over to you all out there to see what questions you might have for the panel. So just come forward to the microphone. And then there's always that awkward silence when nobody comes forward.
Jim, maybe if we make some, general comments that
Sure.
will stir some
Yeah, okay.
conversation.
Marty's going to stir things up here.
Yes, because I want to be a little provocative. One thing I've noticed, in attending this conference is that many of the people outside of North America are not librarians. They're involved in e-learning activities. They're involved with mobile library, services. They're working, closely with Extension. And in some cases, it gets me to think, where are the libraries? Where are the librarians? And, it's interesting. I talked to somebody, yesterday, and he didn't even know that this was a library conference. And, when I met two students from the University of Reading, I just assumed they were from the University of Reading Library and found that they weren't. In talking to somebody else, we talked about the role of libraries in developing countries and the advocacy need, because very often libraries and librarians are not on the radar. They're seen as second class, or they're seen as an add-on, rather than being instrumental. And I'm wondering if that some of it is even in North America, if we do some of that as well. Are we so tied to our buildings because the name of our profession is part of the building name? How many professions have the name of a building in their name? And this is something that Ann Lippo always used to say, that we're in the few professions. You don't call doctors hospitalians, but, librarians work in libraries. Do faculty come to us? Do we wait for them to come to us? I mean, academic faculty, or do we go to them? Are we in their face? Do we expect them to read our newsletters and our blogs, or do we write in their newsletters and their blogs? And this is something that Steve Bell, talks about. So some of it is pushing the envelope so that we are really seen as equals. And one thing I love about us as librarians is that we have much more of a holistic view. That not only do we put people together with information, we put people together with people, with other people with information. And I have found this to be very true in this particular grant that I'm involved with USAID, that the faculty on the grant, they have a very small group that they know about. And that even service resources like Vivo would not even allow them to find, other potential participants. They don't know how to think out of the box. They don't have divergent thinking. The fact that we work in organizations with people from many different disciplinary backgrounds, gives us an advantage. So I'll talk about some little things, later on that we can do, but I wanted to bring in that advocacy role, especially in terms of, international perspectives.
Please, go ahead.
So if you want to start by being provocative, I'm going to bring it right back to you, and I apologize to everybody else that it's 9 o'clock in the morning and I'm starting with this. I'm an information professional. I'm going to my information sciences school, and I deliberately identify on that end of the spectrum. And I would argue with you that this is a library conference. This is an information conference.
Right.
And there is a part that is absolutely appropriate to talk about libraries and librarians. And losing that end of the spectrum would be totally inappropriate and would be shooting ourselves in the foot. However, to limit ourselves to pushing in that direction or to emphasizing that would leave out the other end of the spectrum of the people who are here because they are advocates and they are working with information and mobile tech and doing the boots on the ground extension work with the information. And so if we don't have that entire spectrum, I think it's a problem. And I liked your point that, you don't call doctors hospitallarians, although you do in some languages, which is kind of fun. And so the people that do identify as librarians might actually be more attached to their buildings because that's where they've come from. But how do we make sure that we are serving the needs of everybody? And how do we overcome the barriers of working with the information versus the librarian spectrum to be able to take the strengths from both? I think of some of the things that I'm learning in my master's program about information access and the problems thereof, and what the IAALD, the American Library Association, stands for, and the things that they do, and how important that has been in informing me. And so, how do you balance that entire spectrum with what we're doing?
I want to address one thing before I turn over to the other panels and be provocative back to you. And it's the people that are not at this conference, which are the public librarians in developing countries, because they are the ones that are the primary disseminators of agriculture information, health information, literacy information, etc. They are a trusted resource. They're present in the communities. And I'm very much was influenced when I went last year in October to the BeyondAccess.net conference that took place in Washington, D.C. And it really talked about libraries building communities. And it depends on the community. You look in the United States, and you go to Princeton, which is a very affluent community. They provide certain services, such as, they will have an entrepreneurial group, they'll have a multimedia production lab. You looked at a public library in Botswana where they had 70% unemployment, and that library, it really helped the community in developing an ecotourism industry to gain jobs for that community. So I think libraries and building communities is a major role that they play, and agriculture is part of that. And very often extension agents are not there on a regular basis in the communities. They need to work together with libraries. That's the thing. I don't want to say that extension isn't important. I don't want to say that health workers are not important. But I think libraries are the places that bring all these different groups together. So, okay, that's my...
Do we have another question?
My point of view.
Yeah, Mary, go ahead.
Well, my question isn't really a question, but it's on a totally different topic. So that's okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's a
So
conversation.
one thing, I was at the ACRL meeting, which for the international group is the Association of College and Research Libraries here in the United States, and saw a really interesting poster session where some university libraries had been developing sister library relations and talked about how they had created a program with a regular exchange between a library in, I think, Tanzania, and they were somewhere in the Midwest. And they said it wasn't costing a lot of money, and sometimes international exchanges, one of the barriers is cost. So I was interested in hearing from the panel or from the audience, anybody who's done some sort of sister library or sister institution exchange.
Great. Thanks, Mary. Good question.
Did you want to say something, Julie?
Well, I know at the University of Arizona, we've had librarians from other countries that come as part of, I don't know, is it ARL, I think? A program where they come for like a month or 6 weeks, more as an internship kind of thing. It's not so much an exchange, but it does, you know, bring their perspective to our library, and then they take back what they see, good and bad, to their institutions, you know, what they see in our system, how we work. So, but I like that idea of exchange because you know, it's more of a two-way dialogue, but it's been a good experience to have international librarians come, at least in the form of interns or that kind of program.
Thank you. Can I just see a show of hands in the audience of anybody either in the U.S. or anywhere in the world who has or knows of a sister librarian partnership? If you raised your hand, would you mind coming up to the microphone and just sharing what you know about? Please come forward. So I think it's a really interesting topic that Mary's raised, and I'd love to hear.
In Nigeria, what we have is a situation where librarians go on sabbatical to other sister libraries. For instance, I could go to Federal University of Agriculture in Makurdi, and they can come to our own library in Omodike. We are all agricultural universities, and then we go on sabbatical. So during that period, you take your experience to them, and then when they come to, they tell us what is going on there. We can borrow or decide not to borrow. That's what happens in Nigeria.
And have you done one of these sabbaticals yourself? Is it?
Well, I am new to the agricultural library, but in the medicine where I was, we do, yes.
Okay, okay. And the partnerships are within agricultural universities within Nigeria?
Yes.
Is that right? Okay.
Yes, it is.
That's okay, thank you. That's a really interesting. Jean.
I'm from Cornell, so I'm looking what colleagues are here. But this information is for perhaps colleagues elsewhere. We have a formal MOU with one Chinese university library, which is Tsinghua. We have several informal partnerships. The reason we call it informal is we take a MOU level partnership very seriously. So usually we take a couple of years to understand each other's priority, each other's working culture, and therefore when we sign an MOU, we want to make it a long-term, multi-year. With Tsinghua, we signed the MOU in 2008. Before 2008, we had a 10-year experience working with them. After the MOU, we officially exchange 1 to 2 librarians each year. They are staying up to 3 months, either here or in Beijing. And then it's not just a visiting experience. We also do other things more beyond the exchange. For instance, we exchange information biannually about one particular interest area. For instance, the most recent one was data management. And what's coming is probably what Tsinghua is doing in embedding subject librarians in departmental programs. And on top of that, we use each other's network to do things, to expand partnerships in China or in the US. And in addition, we also develop digital portals to content that either Cornell has or Tsinghua has that we otherwise have either difficult to access or don't have access at all. So it's a broader experience, and I'm responsible for developing these programs or partnerships for Cornell. I work very closely with Barbara and other my Cornell colleagues. If you have questions, you can come talk to me afterwards. Thanks.
Thank you, Sheen. Barbara, do you want to add to what?
Yeah, I just want to make one little comment. So my department here at Cornell, which is the Department of Preservation, we've been running training programs, very intensive training programs since the late 1980s. But I do want to stress, as wonderful as these things are, there's always opportunity costs. And I think if anyone wants to go down this road of sponsoring internships and having people come, learn things at your program for an extended period of time, I believe that it's really important to get some sort of external funding to provide salary relief for the staff that are going to be doing the training, because you need to backfill or provide funding. In the case of the program we're running right now, which is funded by the Henry Luce Foundation, we provide housing, we provide airfare, we provide a per diem, and we also provide cultural opportunities for the folks that are coming to the United States. So I guess my whole point is there's a lot of hidden costs, and as gracious and as, we want to feel like we're doing the right thing, which I totally believe in, I think we still have to consider what the impact is going to be on your program, and particularly the financial impact.
I just wanted to, add a comment, because I was co-chair of the Sister Libraries Committee in the International Relations Roundtable in the American Library Association. And usually when libraries, become sister libraries, it's because their institution or the local community already has some sort of relationship. So in the case of public libraries, it may be the community has a sister city, relationship that the library then takes on. In an academic institution, it could be because either the institution itself or certain departments in the institution have a relationship with an international, university, so that you become involved. In the case of Rutgers, the president of the University of Liberia was a former vice president at Rutgers University. And so we've been involved, myself and my university librarian, working together in recruiting for a new university librarian for the University of Liberia, training, librarians there. It falls into sort of the mission of Rutgers, in saying, that their logo is a local touch, global reach, in trying to be a more global, university. So the libraries have tried to do what we can, to go after that thinking, within the university.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a couple of comments. Firstly, on sister program arrangements. The only one I know of in the Pacific is one between law libraries. The point about that, it works only because the librarians from the, as it were, the more developed library go across and spend several weeks in the host country library, and then that's reciprocated. Only then do they get a better feeling for where their intervention might work, the things that they can do to help. So that's one thing about that. I want to go back, though, to what Marty was saying about libraries being the focal point. And I think in my experience, particularly in the Pacific, it's not the case that there are libraries in every community. In fact, it's rarely the case that there are libraries in every community. So if you were focusing or focusing on channeling your agricultural information through libraries, then you wouldn't be really getting very far. Where the focus is often the school, so we should be thinking about the village school, pushing information through there. But we need to be thinking beyond just disseminating agricultural information through formal channels. We need to be thinking of the informal ways in which people work. People come to market to sell their produce. Have an information point in the market. People get on ferries and boats, even planes to transfer their produce. Have information points there. So we need to spread this whole business out a little bit more. And also looking at the training, why are there not many, as it were, librarians from developing countries attending this conference, and why are there more, for example, plant pathologists or biologists or some other profession? And that's answered somewhat by the fact that although there are training programs, certainly in the Pacific, training programs for librarians, leading to bachelor's level qualifications, mostly the higher qualifications are acquired outside of the region. And there's a cadre of people who are more junior, paraprofessional librarians, but they're in fairly lowly positions. You said second-class citizens. I think they're more third-class citizens, really. The higher level ones, master's holders and that, they're in university libraries or in the libraries of big organizations. And you don't find them in ministries of agriculture. What, in the training I've been doing, as you would, if you would like library work, the training I've been doing is mostly with agricultural officers who've got a certificate in agriculture. I had an experience one time where I had a trainee who had his master's, and I had a trainee who was a cleaner. The cleaner was better. He was able to adapt and learn quickly, but the master's holder was too constrained by being a librarian and not breaking out of that. So there's a lot of different issues in terms. So the point being is that people doing, as it were, library work, which is the building the bibliographic database, building the information resource centers, etc., don't necessarily have to be librarians, although that sometimes helps. And equally, the way in which we get this information out, or the way in which we support the people we're serving, is not necessarily through, it could be anywhere, through health centers, it could be through schools, it could be through vocational training centers. So it's very diffuse. And so I'm glad that this conference represents people from many different quarters. Thank you.
Thank you. Response from the panel?
I just want to make a quick comment sort of related to library exchanges, is that it doesn't even necessarily have to be an exchange where someone travels somewhere else. And an interesting thing I learned yesterday during Manuel Hidalgo's talk about CDOC, the metadatabase, just being connected to something that's spread around a region like the CDOC database gives the library more prestige and sort of helps ensure its sustainability by being more visible. And so there are other ways also to help empower libraries and information centers.
One way that librarians can get more involved internationally, and now I'm talking more to probably North American librarians in particular, is that the Fulbright, Association has short-term programs, and you can sort of manipulate it a little bit, by you put in, to the database your skill set, and you ask, an international university to put in that they're looking for somebody with that particular skill set. And these are mostly short-term, 4 to 8 week, commitments that are paid for by the Fulbright Commission. So it is a way, especially for North American librarians, to possibly make a difference in another university. The other thing I think I've come to realize, and maybe it's from Peter's, talks, is that the role of this conference is really not advocacy. It really is sharing agricultural information. And, I'm very involved with another, a much larger international organization, IFLA, the International Federation of Library Associations, which does have a huge contingency of African librarians. And, and their focus is much more on advocacy for, librarians. So I'm coming a lot from, I think, that perspective, and some of the things I'm thinking about. And so I have to step back a little bit, when I attend a conference like this that is much more focused, in a very specific area.
So I'm going to pick up on, Marty, one of the things you said and spin it back to the panel as a question about, so for all of you, based on your experiences, one of the questions I get, because I've had the opportunity through my position as an outreach librarian here at Mann to do some traveling in Asia and Africa. And one of the questions I often get is, oh, I would like to do that. How do I do that? And it's a hard question to answer. So I'm wondering for all of you, based on your experience, what advice you would give to other people in the field who would like to establish a partnership in some way. What would you say would, what would you tell them? Because it's a hard question to answer. I think the Fulbrights are a great idea.
Yeah. Get involved with the departments, that have global partnerships already, and embed yourself. Talk to them. Show the value that you can provide. It's very interesting. It could be a little thing. I mean, this group of plant scientists I'm working with, they never heard of kayak, as a way of finding the best airline, fares. Little things, maybe because we're working in libraries with more meager budgets, that we have to look at, ways of maximizing, our money as much as possible, that much, more grant-intensive programs are. But then, maybe it's my roots as a New Yorker from Brooklyn. I have this colleague who's in animal science, and she said she doesn't even apply for large grants anymore because she doesn't know how to deal with the money. Because she's always looking to get the best prices, on equipment than just buying them. And so I think some of it, comes from that. But it's interesting once you become embedded, into a group of academic faculty, you find out that you can be, an information professional in so many other ways beyond what was the original intent.
Well, I was just going to say that I think it's important to bring in the faculty and deans, that you need to have acceptance at a high level to get support for a program that you might be mainly with the library. But getting library staff and faculty together is important.
Well, unlike Marty, I was raised as kind of a shy Midwesterner. And if 10 years ago someone would have said to me, you'll be pretty good at going and talking to people and rustling a plane ticket out of them, or or bartering, I'll upload those papers if you'll pay for my hotel. Most of our experience in Ag Econ Search has been going to international meetings of ag economists and having a booth and promoting our project. But then also we've been asked to do things like, okay, that workshop that you do on citation managers, can't you do that at our conference? And can't you talk about Google Scholar and a few things like that? And it's surprising, once you do that and a lot of people come to your session, then the next time around, the group says to you, well, I hope you can come, and if there's any help you need getting there, I think it's more doable to find the airfare and to find someone to help do that than you might imagine before you started out.
And as I said, I've sort of benefited from the partnerships that TL and Agora have built up over kind of a long term, so that's how I kind of made entry into a lot of the things that I've been involved with. But sort of to piggyback on one of the points that Martin made, making yourself available. When I first came here, I said, yes, I'd like to be involved in any way possible. and sort of just jumped in and started with training materials. So that sort of led to a lot of the other things that I've been involved with. Also capitalizing on whatever particular expertise that you have and making it available, like you were saying, offering to do workshops, even if it's for free, and then sort of building up that experience and exposure, I think helps as well.
And one last thing I want to add is that I must get about 15 emails a week for international conferences. About half of them I don't even know what it is about. But my point is, if you are interested in, becoming kind of an international circuit rider, you could submit papers to these conferences and hopefully become an invited speaker. So that's another good route for people to go down, and if you're really lucky, get institutional support for your trip there.
Great. Thank you. All right, I'm going to throw you guys another question. What would you say, either personally and or professionally, is one of the biggest challenges you've faced with your global experience?
I think one thing is that when you're on the ground, there, you have to realize that you're being, in some ways, a diplomat. And, even though I may act one way, at Rutgers and being very vocal, I have to be very sensitive, to local ways of doing things. That things in a country like Liberia, go at a much slower pace, than, Rutgers, which is very close to, New York, and with aggressive drivers and, very fast moving and, at first having some of those same expectations, and I had to tone it down, quite a bit. And also getting out of what is the original focus. Because when as a librarian, when I'm there, I want to make more of a difference than just the role of, in this case, agriculture and engineering that I'm involved with. So I get to know the public librarians. I get to know the champions, in the country. I get to, put together coalitions. I get to revitalize the Liberian Library Association. I get to help them, to develop a Gates grant, even though I know it's not going to go anywhere this year, but maybe it plants a seed, for future years, for their teaching and learning, training grant that they give to libraries. So I, go out much more than just as an agricultural librarian. I go out as a librarian, in trying to push the agenda. Sometimes little things go a long way. I bring gifts with me. Sometimes they're little gifts. I have wonderful dollar stores, in New Jersey and flea markets that I always have like a gift pile, to bring. And I don't only give gifts, to, ministers and, university presidents. I give them to security guards. I give them to the drivers. And it goes a long, long way, in making, my experience, that much more enjoyable, and also, seeing that they go sometimes the extra mile for me. So I think that helps, quite a bit. I think you have to really think of yourself as also being a good ambassador, and it's something that I've learned sometimes the hard way, but now I'm much more in line, I may not be at Rutgers, but I'm much more in line when I go internationally.
Marty made an excellent point about being an ambassador and also taking gifts and giving them to everyone who's helping with a conference, because often there are a lot of staff involved. And I think one of the biggest things with workshops is that you just have to sort of go with the flow. Often I find that people roll into a workshop sometimes a couple of hours late, That's one thing. Or suddenly there's a strike that's going on, and the one IT person who is designated to help out has half an hour that they can help you, and they have to set up everything really quickly. So just getting used to unexpected things occurring is definitely important.
One challenge that we've had is to think, okay, we're going to take one international trip this year, and where is it going to be? How are we going to spend our money wisely, and where haven't we been for a while? And just deciding kind of strategically, we only have so much time and so much energy, and where should it go?
So I've been very fortunate. I've had many international trips over my career here, and I think the cultural connection is very significant, and the way to really make it happen is through food. And I recall the last time I was in China, I'm very adept at using chopsticks. I also grew up in New York City, Marty, that's why. Anyway, and I was eating my lunch every day in the student cafeteria of the Chinese Agriculture University Library. I was the only Westerner there, and all the kitchen staff came out, and they were staring at me in a very friendly way because I was so good at using chopsticks. And I kept making, I don't speak Chinese, but I kept making motions how wonderful the food was, and they were all smiling. So I think that's really important, and it's even, quite honestly, it's a little more challenging for me because I don't eat red meat or pork. So you have to be able to communicate that in a very positive way. And when people feed you, just show tremendous appreciation, and also follow how they eat. If you see they're all waiting for you, you know you need to start or follow the order, and just be very culturally sensitive, because I think just about every culture, food is a really big deal. And if you can be part of the community through food, everyone's going to love you.
And just to piggyback on some of those, the workshop thing that Nicole was talking about, being able to roll with challenges. Had things like, you know, not only just like strikes, but the government shutdowns and crackdowns, the sorts of things where, you know, you have to go kind of miles and miles to kind of get where you're going. Just being flexible and sort of willing to roll with any of those things that come up. I think another thing to think about with kind of global partnerships is also kind of communication, taking the time, not only, you know, in terms of language barriers, but also in terms of kind of intent, kind of workplace cultures, styles of communication, taking the time to get to know each other and to build those bridges, as Barbara was saying.
All right, Camille, as long as you have the microphone, I'm gonna ask you guys the opposite question almost is, what would you say is one of the most satisfying things you've realized through the experiences you've had globally?
Oh man, definitely just the people that you meet, and the experiences that you have together. You know, running around in taxis at like in the night, going to cultural restaurants, and hanging out, like watching cricket together, like those sorts of things. Like, so having that opportunity really just to kind of like meet people, learn from each other, exchange experiences. Also for me, I think in training, those sort of aha moments, when you see people just get things, and also encounter kind of resources they haven't had before, like be able to kind of advance their work.
Well, I think professionally, the thing that has been most gratifying, and particularly doing training for preservation of library materials, is really helping these institutions in dealing with a disaster. You know, what if a pipe burst in your library? And these are frequently libraries that have no idea what to do. So to be able to train people to be able to dry wet books, to be able to deal with books that are falling apart, to properly display materials that go on exhibition, that's all very gratifying. Personally, I think it's really great to be that fly on the wall and have that window on the world. I frequently imagine what's going on at this point in time at places that I've seen, imagining like right now, you know, what's going on in Beijing, you know, the city's going to sleep, you know, it's 10 p.m. at night, you know, and once you've seen places, you can always go back in your mind's eye and re-experience in them, and I find that really pretty terrific.
Well, I think it's been reassuring to know that my skills as an information professional are really valuable to people. We've gone mostly to conferences of economists, and to have them come to our booth and ask, you know, sure they ask about ag econ search, but then they ask about other just sort of general information gathering tasks, and to know that we really have information, have skills that we can pass along and that they're really appreciated.
It's much different communicating with people via email and then meeting them in person. It's very gratifying doing workshops because you get a lot of feedback, and a lot of it also ends up informing the sort of evolution of the Teal product, because it's only when you're in the field that people really tell you what they think of how your software works, and what they like about it, what they don't like about it, and what we could do to make it better. So it's always very gratifying to get all that feedback. And of course, as Camille pointed out, it's like work tourism. It's great to experience a new place through sort of the perspective of someone who's living there, working there, going to work. You're not just, you know, trying to find things to do all day to entertain yourself. You're kind of, it's more of an inside look at a place, which is great.
You know, of course, it's, you know, like everybody else, it's making new connections, it's making new friends, it's being taken to a restaurant that normally, you know, you may not go to, you know, people inviting you into their homes. You know, you really get much more of a cultural experience beyond just the information experience that you're providing. You know, just that, you know, they like you so much. You know, at least in my case, you know, the people from Liberia, it's actually cheaper for them to call me in the United States for 5 cents per minute for them to call somebody else around the block in Liberia for 9 cents a minute. You know, so I get calls, you know, from people, you know, from the universities that I'm working with. And, you know, so it's also good to have that continual connection, you know, between trips, you know, as well, you know, and I think it's the connections that are the most gratifying, that, you know, they're so appreciative of what you do that you want to go beyond, you know, what your original intent was, you know, to do as much as you can, you know, for them, even if it's yourself personally. You know, that I've spent my own money, I give away things, you know, when I travel. You know, I've had that, you know, I've just had that goodwill, you know, feeling that that I want to do it, you know, beyond that it's part of, you know, a project that I'm involved with.
Great, thank you. Any questions from the audience? Please come forward. Gail.
So this has been nice. It's a distinctly North American perspective, though, so I have probably a question for everybody behind me. What, for our international guests, what kinds of partnerships have been most productive and interesting for you? What kind of opportunities do you seek out?
So it's a question for everyone from beyond North America. what sort of partnerships have you had that have been something you'd like to share with the group? And sometimes it's hard to get people to come up to a microphone and share the experience.
My name is Deva Reddy. I am from Texas A&M University. It's not, although the theme of this panel discussion is global opportunities for librarians, I think, although at the back of this theme, I think that is when you say that global opportunities, that means obviously we need funding for that purpose. But my experience says all along, I never had any funding for any global opportunities. And in fact, even before joining the Texas A&M University, I had the opportunity of visiting Ethiopia, Sudan, and Tanzania, and also, of course, the United States, in the University of Wisconsin, and several other universities. I had this opportunity. But these are all on my own. Part of that amount came from the funding agencies before joining here. But after joining the Texas A&M University, I made it a point that to set apart a part of my salary for the international programs. That means on my own, maybe say about $100 or so per month, like that. I made it, I never had any funding. For example, for the last 10 years, consecutively I have been attending the IPLA conferences, where I had the opportunity of initiating a group which was not existing for the last 75 years. I started a group on agricultural libraries, IPLA Agricultural Libraries Interest Group about 9 years back I started. And every year we have a session, 2-hour session in IPLA forum, invite papers, organize those sessions for 2 hours. And instantly I would like to mention, once I think we had an opportunity I wrote to the CTA, several of our librarians are funded here. The CTA came forward to fund 3 of the participants in the IPLA Agricultural Libraries group, and it was a very good opportunity for them. So my point is, it is not always you get funding from somewhere or somebody, because the funding, again, even internal funding, goes by whims and fancies of the administration, or it may be several other factors they count there. But I made it a point that part of my money, if I set apart, the opportunities come, we can network with the people, we can come to know about several cultures and other things. So this is my experience I wanted to say. Of course, I had only one opportunity for a senior Fulbright fellowship for a postdoctoral work at the University of Wisconsin. That was funded by the Fulbright organization. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that. I love that idea of setting aside part of your salary for giving yourself those opportunities to travel and make those connections. Anybody else want to share their experience? Okay, I'm gonna throw a very open-ended question. It's my last question for the panel, and you can interpret it as you wish. What would you say the future holds? Yeah, that really got you.
Well, I think, more and more, when you talk about things like, climate change and other issues, what happens in one part of the world affects, the whole world. I'm very much, in conflict in this current grant that I'm involved with, where I'm developing and libraries for a Center for Excellence in Engineering, where the premier department is mining engineering, knowing that is detrimental, to the environment, and you have all these gold mining companies with concessions, and at the other end, I'm helping to develop a Center for Excellence in Agriculture and Sustainable Development, and so I feel like I'm getting a little schizophrenic, because I end up, going to gold mining companies, which get these lucrative, concessions, in Liberia, and, try to get funding out of them, to support libraries. So it's, it's so hard, in developing countries. I have found because, they need the influx of money, and very often it's going to come from more outside, sectors. I see the amount of money being put in by the Chinese, knowing that they're looking at Africa as a way of feeding, their nation, going after their, natural resources. Yet they're the ones that built, the new, university, of Liberia. So, for me, it's always this, kind of wearing two hats, and I have a lot of problems with that. Sometimes I lose sleep over it.
Probably more partnerships and collaborations across borders, across regions is what's in the future. Just more partnerships, hopefully leaping across continents as well.
Well, I would agree, especially when you look at young people and how much they travel and how they think nothing of going a long way, and it just seems as though we're headed in that direction, and that's a good thing.
So in the library context, I think it's essential that we have global partners, particularly through using digital resources and building databases. I know particularly here at Cornell, a lot of the things that would really strengthen our collections are available at other institutions and vice versa. So any collaboration that we can lead into, in terms of my small little program training, it's a foot in the door into providing deeper relationships with institutions and vice versa for them, because if we develop relationships with these particular institutions, there'd be more of an opportunity potentially, as Sheen referred to, as a memorandum of understanding where you have a relationship with another institution that's particularly concrete.
I'd also say sort of deepening our existing partnerships. Also, since I've been in kind of accidental international partnership person, hopefully getting more of those opportunities, and basically just being able to sort of help push the mission of the university forward, sort of deepen our connections with other groups.
Well, I'd like to have everyone join me in thanking the panel for their thoughts, and thank you very much.
This has been a production of Cornell University. On the web at cornell.edu.